Oh, hi everybody. My name is Joey Rasco. I'm a precision ag and conservation specialist here in North Dakota with Pheasants Forever. Today I'm joined by Brandon Bott of the NRCS here in North Dakota, and we're going to talk to you today about a few programs within the Farm Bill. Before we jump into it, Brandon, would you like to give us a short intro of who you are and how long you've been doing it?
Okay. I've been with NRCS for almost 5 years, and I've been the district conservationist here in McCluskey for a little more than a year. Before that, I was over in Center. My background is in soil science and agronomy, and I've becoming more and more familiar with range science as well. So I'm a jack of all trades. So that's a bit of my background. So
Awesome. Well, I know you and I are both well aware of it, but we're right in the middle of the general CRP sign up, which goes until February 12th. So I think CRP is probably an acronym that a lot of people have heard of, but maybe aren't too familiar with what the program actually is. So I guess let's maybe start there. Could you give us an overview of the CRP program and some of the goals?
yeah, acronym stands for Conservation Reserve Program, and the intent of the program is to offer producers, landowners an option for land that is not suitable for crop production to maybe put it into something a little more useful and also gain some income off of that as well. So, and their intent is to improve the soil quality, water quality, and enhance wildlife habitat in that area. So those are kind of the overall goals for the program.
Okay, so now then, so who's eligible for these programs, and then maybe take it a step further. How is eligibility determined within CRP?
You have to be the private landowner to be eligible, and then the eligibility. There's a few things that go into it. The land itself has to meet cropping history, and that's going to be a unique situation to each field. So, and then that particular field has to have an erodibility index of 8, which is also calculated in our office. So the best thing to do to determine if you're eligible for the program, or if this piece of land is eligible for the program, is get a hold of your FSA or NRCS, and they'll do the office work for you and figure out if your land is eligible or not. So, but you must own the land and have had ownership for at least 12 months. So.
Okay. So then you kind of talk about, your land kind of gets, I guess, more of a score or kind of a grade, and could you maybe describe some things that landowners would be, I guess, scored on, and then how they could maximize their chances of getting into the CRP program? And then once you answer that, maybe, what would you consider to be the most important factor?
Okay. Yeah, there's the ranking process has quite a few different things that it takes in consideration. Most of it is based on the land's physical location, and then the quality or the inherent qualities of the soil. So your physical properties is mostly what it's looking at. Basically, it'll give you your soil a score on how erodible it is, and if it's got a potential to affect water quality due to its properties. Those are all things that the producer cannot manipulate at all. It's all based on our soil survey information that we have. The things that the producer can affect is the wildlife part of the ranking and the enduring benefits part of the ranking, and basically that comes down to what kind of a mix are you willing to put in, and how diverse of a mix you're willing to put into the offer. And obviously the less diverse, a 1 or a 2 species or even a 3 species mix of grasses doesn't rank out so well. But once we get into more diverse mix, going all native species or including pollinator species into your mix, and those rank out quite well and are things that you can choose to enhance or not. It's totally up to you. But the more diverse, more native mixes give you more points in the ranking. So,
okay. So then I guess one of the important factors of deciding whether or not you want to get into CRP, but the payment, if you do get acres enrolled into CRP, you're going to get an annual payment. Could you maybe describe how that's determined, and then kind of how those payments are rolled out?
Yeah, those payments are, so there's a couple different scenarios, and it's going to be dependent on the practice. The first thing is that isn't dependent on the practice is your rental rate. That's entirely dependent on the soil type that you're offering up, and that's a set rate, and it's different by every county. The other part is there's, depending on the practice that you sign up for or offer, there might be cost share available for the grass seeding, and that's generally 50% cost share. The payments are an annual payment once they go out and do your spot check, and then make sure that you're still meeting the criteria, then they'll go ahead and roll out a payment on an annual basis. So,
okay, awesome. And then I guess maybe to wrap up CRP here, if I'm a farmer or a landowner sitting at home, and maybe watching this video, and I go to my local FSA and sign up, and I get some acres enrolled this year, do you have any advice to someone that maybe is brand new to the program, or any pointers or tips that they may need to know about coming in as a new applicant?
The thing I would definitely advise is, once you figure out if your land is eligible for the program, get a hold of a conservationist or specialist. And there's a number of outfits that have them. NRCS, there's Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, North Dakota Game and Fish, Fish and Wildlife Service also. Any of those, and there's more than that. There's all kinds of outfits that are good for learning the programs. But have someone come out and look at your property with you, and have them ask you some questions and make sure that this is really what you want to do with it, and then they'll give you some tips and pointers on how to best go with planning and getting that installed and making sure everybody's happy. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, that's CRP, but maybe let's, I guess, jump into our next program here, the EQIP program. And maybe we'll just kind of go through this again. Just give us an overview and some of the goals of EQIP, and and what EQIP is.
So EQIP is Environmental Quality Incentives Program, another acronym. And, basically, the overarching goals are to offer landowners or operators technical and financial assistance towards anything that's a resource concern or a client objective that deals with soil, water, air, plants, and animals as resource concerns. And it's a site-specific program. You can do a whole farm plan if you want to, or you can just target a particular area that you're interested in working on. That's kind of it's a kind of one-stop shopping for conservation at EQIP. There's a lot of things you can do with it. So.
Okay. Well, maybe could you give us a few examples of some conservation practices that maybe are pretty common here in North Dakota?
Yeah, most of what we're working with is either cropping or ranching or mix of the two. For the crop field, the cropping side of things, we're looking at either no-till or reduced till, cover cropping, doing nutrient management, things of that nature. And then on the grazing lands ends of things, and we're looking at setting up infrastructure for doing rotational grazing. So that might be doing some fencing or putting up a water development, things like that. So,
okay. So if I'm a landowner and I get enrolled into the EQIP program how long do I have to implement one of these practices that I've kind of said that I'll do?
So the process goes, once you sign or do a field visit and sign an application for that batching period, we'll go through the ranking process, and then should you get funded, we'll go ahead and do some paperwork. And once that paperwork is signed, you have 12 months to implement a practice in that plan. So, for example, the grazing system, generally it's quite a bit of construction that goes into doing that, especially with the water development, depending on. So, typically we'll spread that out over 3 or 4 years, depending on the scale, and we'll have you start the first year by installing the water, and then the second year we'll be doing the fence, so on and so forth. But once you sign that contract, you have 12 months to get something completed. So
Okay.
it's not
So
an
then-
all or nothing deal.
Gotcha. So then, so how do the payments work with the equip? Is it, I know it's a little different than CRP. Is it once you implement your practices, is the payment coming to you then?
Yeah. Once you got something installed, you have NRCS come out and make sure it meets spec and you get paid.
So
And
that's basically the incentive to get it done quick. Is the faster you get it done, the quicker you get your payment, right? So
exactly. Yep. And all those payments are dollar per unit. So if you're getting paid on a fence, it's $1, the certain payment per foot.
okay.
Or you're going to do no-till, it's a payment per acre, things like that. So it's not it is a percentage, but it isn't. It's a flat rate, but it generally ends up being about 50 to 60% for a common producer.
Okay.
And there's more incentives if you're a beginning farmer. If you're a beginning farmer, that incentive rate is a little bit higher if you qualify for that. So
Okay.
goes into that.
Yeah. A lot of little things, but
Yeah.
So do you have any, I guess, advice to somebody that would be interested in the equip program? Maybe they never heard of it, but now they're sitting at home watching this. They're like, maybe I can do something on my farm with the equip.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go back like what I said with CRP. The best thing you can do with this is, before we even talk programs, is to have someone come out, look at your farm, get to know you, learn what your goals and objectives are with this farm, and then see if we can help you out with the program and improve upon and get you closer to that goal. That's my best advice, is to have someone out there, and it doesn't have to just be one person. Have more than one person come out there and look at your place and give you their 2 cents.
Sure.
But
yeah,
have that done, and then generally if you have a concern, we'll find some other things that maybe you should consider, and that ends up being a pretty good plan by the end of it, is when everybody's working together on it. So
yep. Awesome. Well, Brandon, let's just move right into our last program here that we're going to talk about, the CSP program. It's similar to CRP and similar to equip, but it's a little different. So maybe just give us a quick overview and some of the goals of what CSP is.
So CSP is, like you said, similar to equip, but it's kind of the next step after equip. Once you've got maybe you needed to install some things to be able to improve your management to the next level, then we'll take you and go to CSP, this is a conservation stewardship program, and that takes what would be normally considered a great practice or good stewardship and add some more criteria to it. So yeah, what else is it? It's a 5-year program where equip is 1 to 3 generally. So yeah, that's kind of the general goals of it. It's a very similar concept to equip, but it's adding a little more to it, basically.
Yep. So I know within the CSP program, I guess the practices that you're kind of taking are called enhancements. Could you maybe talk about a few enhancements that are common in North Dakota, and then maybe also how a producer or farmer could take multiple enhancements and kind of roll them into a bundle?
Right. Yep. So an example of it, there's like 100 enhancements. So there's a lot of them to choose from. But I'll give you an example of one that's pretty commonly used is wildlife friendly haying. So it's taking a normal forage management practice where you're taking forage at optimum use for whatever you're trying to feed with it. But it's also adding the caveats of enhancing a certain parts of, maybe most of what we're targeting here is grassland nesting birds. So it might be delaying your haying until after the nesting season's over, or it's using wildlife friendly techniques, using a flush bar or harvesting in a certain pattern that allows the birds to escape before they go through the haying machine.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Pretty common one. I mean, there's, like we said, we're looking at the whole farm here. which is where it's a little bit different than equip. So each land use, you're going to be signing up for at least one enhancement. So, so then as far as the bundles go, the one that is pretty commonly used would be the soil health bundle. And that one we're looking at cropland, and you would, rather than signing up for each enhancement, say you're going to do no-till, cover crops, and nutrient management plan, and the pest management plan. Rather than signing up for each one of those enhancements on its own, it'd be bundled together as one payment, basically. But you'd have criteria to meet for each one of those aspects of your cropping system. So.
Okay. Awesome. So, I mean, farmers may be doing some of these things on their own and just maybe aren't familiar with CSP, but if, they could potentially, keep doing what they're doing and get paid, get a payment from the CSP program for just implementing some conservation practices that some of them seem pretty simple, on their farm. So I think it's something that folks should definitely take advantage of.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about CSP is you'll go through a couple-hour interview with me, which isn't always that painful, but we'll go through what you're already doing. That's good stewardship, and there's a payment for that part of it. And then the second part of the payment for CSP is for doing these enhancements or these extra things. So it's a two aspect payment, and it usually ends up being a pretty good payment for what it is. So
awesome. So I guess maybe to wrap up CSP, Brandon, you want to just touch on the Grasslands Conservation Initiative? I know it's a fairly new program, I think.
Yeah. So that one is a program that was developed so there's a number of acres that hadn't been cropped in quite a while, and they're no longer eligible for some of the FSA programs. So NRCS just would like to keep those acres in grass and offered up this incentive to keep it in grass. And it's a 5-year deal, and it can be hayed or grazed, either one, as long as it's being managed, or it can be wildlife management, as long as it stays in grass. It's the overarching thing. But the thing is, it's not an open sign up. It's specific acres in each county and that are eligible for it, and FSA will be sending you a letter if you are eligible for that. So it's a good program. It's not for open to everybody. But if you are a particular person that's got that opportunity, I would absolutely take it. So
for sure. Yeah. Well, hey Brandon, I think that's about all I've got for you. So I guess if you're one of the lucky folks that resides in Sheridan County, I guess they should come see you, right? And then but I know with COVID and everything going on, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Just give you a call, or I know some offices are open on certain days and that kind of thing, but
the best thing is to just give us a call at the office. We're still on a locked door policy, unfortunately. So just give me a call and we'll set up a time to discuss what you want to do, and then make an appointment to go to the field. So
yeah.
That's the best way.
Yeah, and if you reside outside of Sheridan County, I guess just the best thing to do is just get a hold of your local FSA NRCS office in your county and ask them about the programs that you're interested in and go from there. So, but yeah, with that, Brandon, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and hopefully somebody can take something away from this. And I guess we'll, unless you have anything else to add, we'll just end on that.
No, I think that's all I got to say. I'm really pleased with the programs that you guys offer up, and I think they're good things to do. So I think they work real nice with what I'm working with here too. So
yep, I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and working with you with some of these programs, and I think it'll be a really good thing. We can help a lot of people. So
absolutely.
All right, Brandon. Well, I'll see you later.
All right, thank you.
I said, and what I said earlier is that my name is Wanda Brayton, and I am the Conservation Program Director here for the North Dakota State Office. I've been with FSA for almost 36 years now. working in both Minnesota and North Dakota, primarily with the CRP program. The last few years I've tried out a couple other programs, but basically conservation is where my heart is, and that's where I like to come back to. I always say that I may have started the agency when the CRP program was first officially established back in 1985, but with the success of this voluntary federal program, CRP is going to long last my career. So, and that's really great to see. You know, it's exciting to see all the acres that we have out there and the wildlife that's been enhanced by it. As you may know, CRP is one of the largest private landowner conservation programs in the nation. As with many things, CRP has evolved over the years. It started as an incentive for farmers to retire environmentally sensitive cropland, with the added benefit of helping to reduce the nation's surplus of commodities that put that downward pressure on those crop prices. Today, CRP has grown into an environmental program which converts environmentally sensitive to a conservation or a resource conserving cover to help protect our nation's resources, such as the reduction of soil erosion, helping to improve water quality, and provide wildlife habitat to critical and endangered species. I did put some statistics down on here for you, so that you can see that that's what's on the slide. But at one time, the national cap for CRP was 36 million acres. The 2012 Farm Bill reduced that cap down to 24 million. And then with the release of the 2018 Farm Bill, it authorized a gradual increase of CRP back up to a $28 million or million acre cap. In North Dakota, the highest acreage enrollment was roughly 3.6 million acres back in 2007. Today, North Dakota has a little more than 1.3 million acres enrolled, with approximately 600,000 acres due to expire in the next 3 years. So you can see that we're going to see hopefully a lot of enrollment, but a lot of acres that could potentially be coming out of the CRP program in the next few years. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm just going to provide you with some basic eligibility. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different payments that we have and how our soil rental rates are established. And then I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the additional incentives and our cost share program. So I'm just going to start out with just an overview of the CRP. Our CRP contracts can be for a contract period of 10 to 15 years in length, depending on the sign-up type and the conservation practice selected for enrollment. CRP is broken down by sign-up types, with each sign-up type having a certain eligibility criteria. The first sign-up type is the CRP general sign-up. This sign-up is very competitive, where producers compete on a nationwide basis for enrollment using what's called an Environmental Benefit Index score, or an EBI, if you hear that. Acceptance in a general CRP is determined by the national office using a cutoff score, and Rachel's going to talk more about the EBI as we go on. Eligibility for general sign-up enrollments is based on both cropping history and land eligibility, and we're going to take a quick look at that in just a minute. The second sign-up type is a continuous CRP sign-up. This sign-up is not competitive. If it's determined that there is a resource concern and the establishment of a conservation cover is needed and feasible in order to solve whatever resource or environmental concern is on the land, then the offer can be accepted on a continuous basis throughout the fiscal year. And for FSA, the fiscal year begins on October 1st and it runs through September 30th. Under the continuous CRP sign-up, we also administer such programs as the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, otherwise known as CREP, which is a program that it requires an agreement between both federal and state in order to target specific areas of the state where a specific concern has been identified, such as water quality or critical habitat for certain wildlife species. The enrollment in a CREP contract provides the funding from the federal source, as with all CRP contracts, but it also provides additional funds from a state partner in the form of incentives or additional cost share for any of those acreages that are enrolled. Currently, North Dakota FSA has partnered with the North Dakota Department of Ag in order to administer the North Dakota Riparian CREP project that's located down in the southwest part of the state. The 2018 Farm Bill also authorized a couple of pilot programs, one of which was called the Soil Health Income Protection Program, otherwise known as SHIP. And that had some enrollment in fiscal year 20. And this type of a sign up was also considered a CC, like a continuous CRP program that targeted land located within the prairie pothole region in 5 different states. There is also the CRP grasslands sign up type, where enrollment of land is also based on a competitive sign up using a national ranking process to determine acceptability into the program. The CRP grassland program was developed to enroll both cropland with existing forage and non-cropped forage areas into a CRP contract for a 10 to a 15-year period. The intent of this was to limit future development and cropping while maintaining grazing or the production of forage and seed. We do have another CRP grassland sign up that is scheduled for March 15th through April 23rd of 2021. So we have a sign up coming up. So as you may have heard through media or any kind of FSA outlets or newsletters, the sign up period for the general CRP sign up 56, it did begin on January 4th of 2021, and it will run through February 12th. All completed offers must be received within the county office by the close of business on February 12th in order for it to be considered a valid offer. In reviewing the eligibility for general CRP 56, we start by reviewing the eligibility of the land. So eligible land includes 2 basic eligibility criteria for cropland. The first requirement is that the acreage must have been planted to an ag commodity 4 out of 6 years, those years being 2012 through 2017. And this does include those acres that were planted to alfalfa or another multi-year grass during the years of 2012 and 2017, or it could be alfalfa or other multi-year grasses that were planted in a rotation not to exceed 12 years. The next criteria is that the land must be physically and legally capable of being planted in a normal manner to an ag commodity during a normal cropping season. So with the weather that we've had across the state, it's sometimes hard to determine what that normal manner is in a normal year because of possible drought on one side and abundance of rain on the other. But county offices are tasked to go back into our acreage reporting records to determine what those normal years would be. And then land that is currently enrolled in CRP right now, that's due to expire on September 30th of 2021. That is also eligible cropland for enrollment in general sign-up CRP, unless it is determined that the acreage didn't meet cropping eligibility when it was initially enrolled. But in most cases, 99.9% of the time, that expiring CRP would be eligible for re-enrollment into CRP. So besides the cropland eligibility that I just talked about, land may also be eligible for enrollment or must be eligible for enrollment under the general sign-up criteria if the land falls into one or more of these criteria that I have listed. The first is that the weighted average erodibility index, what is known as the EI, for the 3 predominant soils must be 8 or greater, or the land is currently enrolled in CRP, scheduled to expire on September 30th. And then the last one would be cropland that is located within a national or a state conservation priority area. Our national priority area, again, is the prairie pothole region, and we do have a state priority area that is located down in the southwest part of North Dakota. So there is or could be a situation that a producer submits an offer for a general sign-up 56, and the cropland is determined to be eligible, but if the land doesn't meet land eligibility criteria, for one of these three requirements for general sign-up, then it would not be eligible for enrollment. So that's why I said for general sign-up, there's two different criteria that we have to follow. For an eligible person determination, an eligible owner must have owned the land for 12 months prior to the close of the general sign-up period. There are exceptions where if owner of the land under an expiring CRP, they may reoffer the land regardless of the length of time that they owned it. So if they currently just obtained that land maybe a couple of months ago, they haven't completed the full year of ownership, because it's currently under CRP, they could still submit an offer and it could be accepted. And then of course, the last one would be if anyone acquired the land by will or succession as a result of a death, then they would be eligible, considered an eligible owner. We also have definitions for an eligible operator, and there again, an operator must have operated the land for 12 months prior to the close of the general sign-up period. And they must provide satisfactory evidence that control of the land will continue uninterrupted for that contract period. And when we're talking about satisfactory evidence, it could be such things as a signed statement by the owner, a written lease for a contract period, or it could even just be the owner's signature on the CRP1. So when processing an offer for CRP, the county offices will establish the maximum payment rate for the offer using information obtained from the location of the offer and soil survey information. So the maximum per acre payment rate is determined by identifying the average soil rental rate of the three predominant soils identified on the offer for the CRP enrollment. This might get a little bit technical, and I apologize for that, but the soil rental rate for CRP, they're based on multiplying the county average rental rate by soil specific productivity factors. A soil rental rate table will show the individual maximum soil rental rate for groups of soils by using NRCS's soil map units and then based upon a soil survey ID. Now, the soil map units are then grouped together based on similar productivity levels, and they're placed into three different similar groupings that are reflected on what's called a soil rental rate posting report. Now, for both general sign-up 56 and continuous sign-up 55, county offices are required to place a copy of a posted report, soil rental rate posting report, within the county office itself. Because under the 2018 Farm Bill, the soil rental rate percentage for general sign-up is reduced to 85% of that calculated rental rate based on that productivity group. And then for continuous, they receive 90% of that soil rental rate. So again, I got a little bit technical there, but I believe that you guys would understand when we're talking about productivity levels and factors. So just going on, before I move on that, the participants will use the maximum per acre rental rate when offering a bid for enrollment in the CRP acreage. And then of course, the annual rental payments are based on the acreage enrolled times the maximum per acre rate offered. So that's how we get our annual rental payments. Along with the annual rental payment, producers who enroll new land into eligible continuous CRP sign-up practices will receive a one-time signing incentive payment, which is called SIP. The SIP payment is not authorized for re-enrolled CRP or land that was previously enrolled under a CRP contract. It's only authorized for new land that's being enrolled into CRP. The SIP payment is equal to 32.5% of the first year annual rental payment, and it will be issued after the CRP1 is approved. So that's a payment that is received up front. Another CRP incentive payment is the practice incentive payment, or what's called PIP. The PIP is also a one-time payment that is based on 20% of the total eligible installation cost for establishing the continuous CRP practice. Therefore, the PIP is considered another form of share. One thing to note on that is that all cost share, the PIP payment, and any cost share assistance from any outside source, it cannot exceed 100% of the cost of the practice installation. So it can't exceed 100% of that producer's out-of-pocket cost. So I talked a little bit here about cost share. So cost share assistance becomes available upon the approval of a CRP1 contract, and it's based on the fact that the producer is agreeing to establish the approved conservation practice within a 12-month period. There are a few exceptions to that 12-month period or establishment rule, and those would be such as if the seed is unavailable or weather conditions aren't right, or any kind of adverse weather that prevents that producer from seeding that cover timely. Also, cost share is only authorized when the conservation cover must be established. So no cost share would be issued if there is an existing cover on the acreage and that existing grasses meets those practice requirements. Cost share assistance is equal to 50% of the eligible cost, not to exceed established limitations that we have. And also, as mentioned in the previous slide concerning the PIP, the total cost share assistance for the practice establishment, including any of those, including that PIP payment, cannot exceed 100% of that producer's out-of-pocket expenses. So just to give you a really quick example on that, if a participant received additional cost share through an outside source such as Pheasants Forever or North Dakota Game and Fish, FSA will subtract that funding from the total eligible installation cost, along with any calculated PIP amount, in order to determine what the maximum cost share amount will be to ensure that it's not exceeding 100%. So once the practice is established, or if the existing conservation cover meets the practice requirements, the maintenance of the cover becomes the participant's responsibility. By signing the CRP1, the participants are agreeing to comply with the state noxious weed laws. They're agreeing to control all weeds and pests, along with ensuring that the vegetative cover is maintained for that 10 to 15 year period of the contract. Participants will also be required to perform a minimum of one required management activity according to an approved NRCS conservation plan. That activity must be completed outside what's called a primary nesting season, and that's a period of time between April 15th and August 1st. And that one required management activity has to be completed on those acreage without additional cost share assistance. The one required management activity, it also must be completed prior to the last 3 years of the contract period in order for that contract to remain in compliance. Failure to complete the one required management activity, it is considered a violation to that contract, and it does have consequences like possible termination or some kind of an assessed payment reduction on the acreage. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch base on is that all conservation practices are eligible for non-emergency haying and grazing, with the exception of any tree practices. Participants interested in conducting non-emergency haying and grazing, they must submit a request in writing to the county office to perform that activity. The participant must also ensure that the activity is included in their NRCS conservation plan, and they need to sign to the terms and conditions of performing the non-emergency haying and grazing with the county office prior to conducting that activity. The activity must be conducted outside of the primary nesting season, but it must be completed, and it also must be completed by a required deadline of August 31st for haying and September 30th for grazing. So that means by September 30th, all the livestock would have to be removed from the acreage, or when 50% of the forage is removed. Approval of the activity, it does require a 25% payment reduction on the acres that are actually hayed or grazed. But in past farm bills, managed haying and grazing have been authorized, but they are only, or were only authorized on certain conservation practices, where with the 2018 Farm Bill, it actually opened it up for all conservation practices under a CRP contract, except for trees, to be able to perform or request to have non-emergency haying or grazing on those acres. I did provide some program information for anybody that is interested. You can go to either one of these two websites to obtain some additional information. www.farmers.gov is a good source to find any information on any of our USDA programs, but it also has a link to conservation, and so does the USDA.FSA.gov. I also provided a link to our program fact sheets. There's quite a few of them out there pertaining to all of the programs that I talked about today, the general, the continuous, and our grasslands. So I'd welcome you to visit that site as well and take a look at some of that information. On this slide, I did provide my contact information. I have my email address on there along with my phone number. So if anybody has any questions after this presentation is done, please feel free.
Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone this evening. Hannah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, so one of the things I'm going to talk about today is the Environmental Benefits Index related to the General CRP. It's pretty time appropriate, I think, because the General CRP sign up is going on right now through February 12th. And understanding the EBI associated with that is really going to help you, I guess, put forth the most competitive offer that you can for the sign up. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and then we'll kind of go through some of the high points of the EBI and hopefully give everyone a little bit better understanding about it at the end of this. Okay, so everybody should see a screen with a large, I guess, orange bubble in it. So again, my name is Rachel, and yeah, we'll walk through the EBI. I think Wanda during her presentation talked about the two, or the several different programs within CRP, both the general sign up and then continuous practices. The EBI is really relating just to the general sign up. And what the EBI is used for, it is used to rank those offers under general CRP. Unlike continuous CRP, general CRP is a competitive sign-up process. So if you were to put an offer in under general CRP, that offer is going to compete with other offers nationwide. National FSA office will determine a cutoff score at the end of the sign-up, and anything above that score gets accepted, anything below it does not get accepted. We don't know at the beginning of the sign-up what that score is going to be. So the best advice we give to people interested in putting an offer in is try to maximize your score, get the highest score possible, just to increase your likelihood of getting accepted into the program. So with the EBI, there are 6 factors that make up the Environmental Benefits Index, 6 factors that are evaluated and worth a various number of points. The first factor, we call it the N1 factor, is the wildlife factor, and that is worth anywhere from 10 to 100 points within your EBI score. The second is going to be N2, focused on water quality, and again, that one's up to from anywhere from 0 points to 100 points you can get from that factor towards your score. The third, N3, is erosion, mostly dealing with highly erodible soils. Those soils that are more environmentally sensitive usually rank higher than soils that are less environmentally sensitive. Again, 0 to 100 points available under that particular factor. Next one, N4, is enduring benefits factor, and this is worth 0 to 50 points. This is kind of one where you have an ability as an applicant to, I guess, influence indirectly, but to explain it briefly, it's just what is the likelihood of the practice that you're going to install for this CRP contract? What is the likelihood that that CRP contract or those acres will last past the CRP contract, will still provide environmental benefits after the expiration of the CRP contract? Practices, long-lived practices like any tree plantings usually tend to be higher scoring in this because people don't plant trees just to not have them again in 10 years. That's a long-term investment. The fifth factor is air quality benefits. anywhere from 3 to 45 points available for that sub-factor or that factor. And last but not least, N6 is associated with cost. 0 to 25 points are available for that particular factor. It's a lot of factors, 6 factors. Each of the 6 factors have anywhere from 2 to 4 sub-factors. So I won't go into detail on each of these factors. What I'm going to do is really highlight some of the ones that you as a CRP applicant have the most control over to influence. The first one of those being N1, the wildlife factor. So within the wildlife factor, there are 3 sub-factors. There's the wildlife cover, and that's 0 to 50 points are available to an applicant. N1B, the second sub-factor, is wildlife enhancement. Will you include some sort of enhancement into your CRP offer that would benefit wildlife? If so, you have either 0, 5, or 20 points available under that sub-factor. And then N1C, wildlife priority zones, and I'll go over what those are for North Dakota. But basically, if your land happens to fall within the wildlife priority zone for North Dakota, you'll receive additional points. So let's delve into these. So the first one, N1A, the wildlife cover benefits. This is if you have new cropland that you're trying to get accepted into CRP, you're going to have to decide what type of cover, what type of grasses and wildflowers and forbs are you willing to put out there. For the most part, the generalization can be made that if you're willing to plant a higher diversity mix, so more species of grass, more species of wildflowers, and have those species be native, your offer is going to rank or receive a higher score than if you simply want to plant 1 to 2 introduced grasses. So I always encourage people to go diverse. I'll just kind of highlight a few of these on the ones that I've seen be most common practices within North Dakota. And you have CP1, which is a permanent introduced grass and legumes, anywhere from 0 to 40 points. And then you have a CP2, which is permanent native grasses and legumes, 0 to 50 points available. In order to get the 50 points within CP2, you have to be willing to plant a diverse stand of native wildflowers and grasses. CP3, we don't see a lot of CP3s within North Dakota, but that's the score there. And this is all available. I believe Hannah will send out an EBI flyer to all the participants after the event. On to some more common practices. CP4D is probably, in my experience, probably one of the most common practices we see applied across North Dakota, permanent wildlife habitat. Again, if you're willing to plant either an existing or planted mixed stand, a minimum of 4 species of grasses and forbs, then it's worth 40 points. Now with this one, you do have the flexibility to, this one does not have to be specifically native species. You can include introduced species in that. But for the CP4D, 50-point mix has to be a highly diverse minimum of 5 species. Most mixes end up being more than that of strictly native species, so native grasses and wildflowers, and that's a 50-point cover. And then if you come down here to safe projects for grass practices, again, I'll show you where all the safe projects are within North Dakota, but you receive, I guess, some advantages to your cover score if your offer happens to fall within one of those safe areas. So just a nice just visualization of what a highly diverse native stand may look like. This one was actually done in Barnes County, North Dakota. Pretty diverse mix, probably anywhere from 7 to 8 grass species, and I think somewhere around 16 to 24. We did quite a few wildflower species in this, but a little bit longer to establish for native species, but they're longer lasting, more drought tolerant, and just outright beautiful. So on to the next sub-factor under N1, the wildlife factor, and that's wildlife enhancement. So as I mentioned briefly before, if you're willing to put some sort of enhancement out there, then you can receive additional points. The first one being 20 points are available if at least 51% of your offer falls within a safe project area. In the next slide, I'll show where those safe projects are. But being in North Dakota, we're pretty fortunate because we do have 6 safe projects, which encompass a large majority of the state. So chances are, unless you're in the Red River Valley, your land likely will fall within a safe project area. So just being where you're at is 20 points. Second one is if you are really interested in pollinators, maybe want to attract more bees and butterflies to your property, you can opt to include, to establish a small area of pollinator habitat within your overall CRP contract. Now, the difference between pollinator habitat and maybe some of the other stuff is just the diversity of wildflowers you have out there and the time period in which they bloom. Within pollinator habitat, those mixes are designed to have species blooming during the early, mid, and late blooming periods. So usually some of the first ones we see start blooming in, maybe late May or June, and then some will bloom after the first frost. And again, if you choose to do that, that's 20 points. You receive additional points you receive. And then the last is the food plot. If you'd like to put a food plot in your offer, there are some size restrictions that can be worked out once you decide, the acreage of the field you're offering into CRP, but that will get you 5 points. So one thing about the points available within this N1B, this wildlife habitat or this wildlife enhancement subfactor, is they're not cumulative. You can't decide if you're in the safe project area, you get your 20 points. You can still do pollinator habitat in addition to that, but you're not going to receive an additional 20 points. They're not cumulative. It's 0 if you have none of these factors, 20, 20, or 5. It's not, you can't do all 3 and get 45 points on that. Okay, N1C. Oh, sorry, before I get to that, these are the maps of the safe project areas. So SAFE is an acronym for state state acres for wildlife enhancement. You'd think I'd know what that meant. And these are just the maps, the highlighted areas for the 6 projects we have available in North Dakota. So if your CRP offer falls within one of these shaded areas, you will automatically get 20 points within the wildlife enhancement factor. And then just a visual example of some pollinator habitat or an annual food plot that can be also included in your CRP contract or offer. N1C, Wildlife Priority Zone. So again, this is another one that you can receive additional points for if your CRP offer, so if your land happens to fall within the green shaded counties, you'll receive additional points on your CRP score. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. As I mentioned before, there's 6 factors. I don't want to go into the details of each of those 6 factors because sometimes as an applicant, you just can't influence the score. It's based on the erodibility, the where your land is located. And yeah, so you can't really influence those. So I'm trying to hit on the ones that you as an applicant have the most ability to influence. So we'll skip down to N5. Air quality benefits, and then we're going to go down to the D subfactor, carbon sequestration. So this one isn't necessarily something you directly impact, but based on the type of cover that you choose to establish, whether it's that, that introduced grass mix, that native grass mix, or that permanent wildlife habitat, or maybe even pollinator habitat, that will then determine the number of points that you get in this factor for the EBI. Just as a thing, a CP1, which is the introduced grass practice, and a CP2, which is the native grass practice, you get 3 points for carbon sequestration. If you do a CP4D, which would be the permanent wildlife habitat, 4 points under this factor. And then if you choose to do like a pollinator habitat, then you'll get 5 points. And the last factor really that you as an applicant have the ability to impact or influence is the second subfactor B under cost. You as an applicant can choose to accept less money for your rental payment. So FSA, Wanda kind of went through how FSA calculates what the annual rental payment will be for your CRP offer, and then you're presented with that number. If you choose as an applicant to accept less than that, then you can get additional points on your EBI score. For example, as an applicant, maybe you want to take 5% less than what was offered. You will receive an additional 10 points on your EBI score. Now, I always encourage people to put the best score forth that they can. And, we never know what that cutoff is going to be. So if you can get the highest score possible, that's just going to increase your likelihood of being accepted. I never tell anyone to take less money. That's a decision that you as an applicant need to make. What I do encourage people to do is to think about the investment in the wildlife habitat. If it's a matter of making a decision, if you have to plant cropland back to grass, if you have new land, you can decide to plant a low diversity mix for 10 points. Or if you make that choice, you have to plant grass anyway, so you could make the choice to plant a higher diversity stand and receive 50 points. That's a gap of 40 points. So I always encourage people to invest in the wildlife cover that they put on the offer. And then, that's going to bump your score most. And at that point, if you still want, you still feel like you need a couple extra points, then you as an applicant can choose to take a reduced payment. That's really all I have, to go over as far as the EBI. There's a lot to it. It can get fairly complicated. I just wanted to highlight some of the factors that you as applicants have the most control over to influence and to increase your score on. Excuse me, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we don't know what that cutoff score is going to be at the beginning of the sign up. That's determined afterward. So put your best offer forth and, just kind of go with it. You don't ask your local service center what the score is going to be because they don't know. We just don't know. So again, final piece of advice, just, if you really want to get into CRP, do what you can to maximize your score. That wildlife factor, that N1 wildlife factor is really going to be your best chance as an applicant to maximize your score, to increase it. You can offer more environmentally sensitive lands, and that plays into both the erosion factor and the air quality factor. The example I give for this is, say you have a quarter section of land, and on one side of that quarter section you have a very steep hillside, and the other side it kind of flattens out. If you were to offer the whole quarter section, they're going to look at the erodibility of the entire quarter, both the flat area and the more sloped area, and you're going to get an erodibility index score. Now, if you were to take it and just offer the sloped area, that hillside area, into CRP, your erodibility index is likely going to be higher, and you'll receive more points under the air quality and the erosion factor sub-factors on the EBI than if you were to offer just the flat area of the field. So that's kind of, think about that. Think about the land you're going to do. That's one way you can influence, just by situating and moving your offer around. And then last but not least, consult with a local expert, whether it's myself or Hannah, or you talk to one of the game and fish biologists that Kurt will talk to you about later, or talk to someone at your local NRCS or FSA office about how you can maximize your score.
The programs and associated information highlighted in these videos was collected and recorded in January of 2021. Funding programs do change periodically, so please contact your local resource professionals, including us at North Dakota Pheasants Forever, for the most up-to-date information.